Welcome, everyone. My name is Peter Wanders. I'm the president and CEO of Anderson Ranch. We are so thrilled to have a great group of panelists to join us for Thinker Thursdays, and we're really excited about the great audience we have joining today. Thinker Thursdays has been a running, I was going to call it a tradition. I think it's been a tradition now for about 8 months straight. But really a fun way to bring together creatives and passionate people to really share their interests in a very quick, succinct format. Each speaker has chosen 15 images. They get 15 seconds per image to present their idea, thought, artwork, passion, whatever that is. And so it creates a quick round of interesting, thoughtful programming. At the end of that, we will have a Q&A. I will start with a few questions for the panelists to give you a chance to type yours into the Q&A window. If you hover over your screen toward the bottom, you'll see on the far right a little Q&A button. If you click that and type your questions, then I will read those to the panelists. In the Zoom format we're using, participants can't pop in and ask their questions directly, so I'll field those for them. Really excited to have everybody and get started. Accra, I believe you are first. Each panelist gets to a moment or two to introduce themselves. We've told them 2 or 3 seconds. They give a little cue to the team here who starts their slides. Their slides automatically rotate through the 15 slides. And at the end of that, the next speaker's name pops up. So we will keep on going. Really excited to have you. Let's get going.
Hi, thank you, Peter. And thank you, everyone, Leah and Esther and Andrea. It's wonderful to be at the ranch virtually. My name is Accra. I'm an artist from New York. I have taught workshops at the ranch. I have been a juror for the residency. I have done studio visits with the residents, and I participated in the auction. So I guess we could start. So it's mid-March in New York, and I'm at home like everyone else because I'm an artist. I'm not an essential worker, and the city's been shut down. And like every other artist in New York, this is Nurse Jocelyn, by the way, from a local hospital I'll name in a moment. I'm trying to figure out what I should be looking at. What should I be seeing? What should I be making? What kind of images am I supposed to make during the pandemic? You know, it kind of sounds like science fiction every time I say it. That was Britt and Kim, who are EMTs, and this is Nurse Omar. And then it hit me like a ton of bricks. This hospital, Elmhurst Hospital, where these people work, it filled up first. It was no more room at the inn, done. And I needed to be looking at my own neighborhood. I lived in the epicenter within the epicenter. This is Jamel and his mother. And so I photographed the essential workers. I was looking at people in my neighborhood. I called it the COVID journal because it was a kind of a diary. I wanted to understand what it looked like in my neighborhood, in my part of the world. There was no hope to do anything comprehensive or universal. So the woman with the bags was Karina, because there was a major shift. All of a sudden, because people could not work, people were going hungry. And there was a need for food banks. So the 2 gentlemen with their hands raised up, they were senior citizens in the senior citizen food bank line. And this is Cody with a rather large bag of onions. The restaurants kind of really stepped up and were donating massive amounts of food. And so I was wrapping my head around this when all of a sudden another shift happened. There was the triple murder of Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, and the country just shook. And again, I was like, what am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to look at? I saw these amazing images coming from everywhere. And like everyone else, I wanted to see more, but it wasn't something that I felt I was going to be able to participate in until I remembered, oh yeah, the pandemic, that. And this social justice movement that was trying to save lives was unfolding within this other moment where going outside risked your life. And so it became part of the COVID journal, despite the fact that Black Lives Matter predated the pandemic. This iteration of it and the social justice protests was unfolding within it quite definitively. So I found myself at the protests trying to understand what shape it was taking, trying to understand how it related to the pandemic. And I'm still uncovering that. It's an ongoing process. I don't think I'll be done for quite some time. These images that we're looking at from the protests, it's from maybe 4 or 5 different protests. And this is the last image. So I'll just let it go out on this. Thank you very much.
Really strong work, Accra. Thank you for sharing that. I oversee photography at National Geographic, and I've taught at the ranch the last few summers. We've also spent the last few months covering the coronavirus around the world and also in the United States. And like Accra, we focused at the front lines and also looked at the impact on communities. But we also wanted to invite our photographers who are located all over the world to take a look. You know, they're grounded at home like most of us, and we wanted to give them a chance to really look at what's happening inside and outside their own windows. So that's what I'm going to be sharing with you tonight. Go ahead, Leah. The earth has stilled. Photographer Cesar Rodriguez was walking alone on the beach in Bucharest, Mexico, when a woman on a horse passed him. She appeared and went fast, like a mirage. The city of 6.5 million inhabitants is mute and empty, says Cristina Garcia Rodero about Madrid. You only hear the sounds of some cars or footsteps on the way to the supermarkets and pharmacies. In Krakow, Poland, the main reading room at the Jagiellonian University Library has probably never been so hushed, documented here by photographer Rafał Milak. I didn't tell my family that I was isolated and sick in bed with COVID-19, says Ismail Ferdous. I looked forward to the moment every day when the light would hit my shelf and illuminate my parents, who are back in Bangladesh. That time was the quietest in recent memory. The pandemic may have shut down much of the human world, but nature hasn't gotten the message. I'm grateful for the shock of color I receive each morning, says Nicole Sobecki in Nairobi. In the late afternoon, rolling thunder marks the arrival of a tropical downpour, and lightning illuminates the darkened sky in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, says Ian Tay. After the rain, the sweet scent of wet leaves drifts through my window. I was walking near the Bosphorus thinking I'd never felt this lonely in the city before, says Emin Osman, when I saw this incredible scene. Thousands of jellyfish enjoying the deep, quiet blue water of Istanbul. Our daily outings are always in the evening, says Carla Gachet. We try to find hidden places where we can just be. We let go of all our day's drama as the sun goes down. Nature is a complicated term when it comes to Johannesburg, says Lindo Kule Sobekwa. People in the townships often don't have gardens. This image reminds him of growing up. There were flowers near a dumping site that we used to pick. Our neighbors and neighborhoods take on greater significance. People haven't stopped going out, Lindo continues. They chill by the tuck shop with their friends. Children play in the streets, only running back home when the police tell them to stay indoors. One day, my partner and I rode our bikes around to say hi to some friends in the neighborhood, trying hard to follow the 6-foot distance rule, writes Carolyn Drake. But socially distancing isn't an option for everyone. In Brazil, Luisa Dor photographed Andre, who runs a convenience store with his wife. Here, he's delivering orders so his customers won't crowd his tiny shop. In South Africa, Mohaleda works as a security officer in a shopping mall 6 miles from his home. It has been more difficult to get there. It worries me to use public transportation at the moment. Pandemic precautions are forcing families into stark separation or intense intimacy. There are only the people you can't see and the people you see every day, all day. Here, photographer Jasper Dost photographs his oldest daughter. And I'm spending my days in the nutty, charming, and emotional roller coaster world of 2- and 4-year-olds, says Jonas Bendixson. The world shrinks down, and we're in some sort of state of incredible right here and nowness. Thank you.
Thank you, Whitney. My name is Christy Mann. I am a local Aspen local ski mountaineer. I have a long time relationship with Anderson Ranch, and I love the word resilient because right away it recognizes that we're all going to fail, but it also speaks to the important part. It speaks to the bouncing back from it. And that's where I think the lessons are learned. This is where our strength comes from. This is where we get to imagine the life that we want to live. And I spent a lot of time in the mountains behind Anderson Ranch, way behind in the wilderness there and around the state of Colorado during the spring. And it was especially relevant, I think, for me to think about the lessons that we can learn from the mountains. And I'm just going to share a few of these with you today. So ready to go. I have a motto, always go. It's 4 p.m. on the second peak of the day, and I'm tired, I'm exhausted. It's hours back to the car. But it's not the easy things that we do in life that are forever etched in our minds. Facing fears. I can barely look at this photo because I know what happens afterwards. I fall and I injure my knee. 5 years later, I have still a fear of falling, but the mountains keep calling me back to face these fears just about every weekend. Finding true value. For me, the value is in a day away, pushing away from the rest of the world, making some space between me and everything else. No phones, no screens, no distractions. Rolling with life's punches. I think the things that you plan for in life are never the things that happen. This is us coming out of the train, waiting for the train that never showed up. We thought, of course, zombie apocalypse. Turned out to be just a rockfall. The sense of play. I think as adults that we lose our sense of wonder and freedom, and the mountains allow us to experience sheer joy, to just be away from everything. Always a pigeon scout, never gonna get that eagle badge. We always say that we're in this school for ski mountaineering and we're never gonna graduate, just learning the lessons of life. This photo always reminds me about everything being just one step at a time, that all the little steps we take in life come together to create huge summits and huge accomplishments, and that we can always accomplish more than we think. Here, I don't know if you can see the devastation of the forest behind you, but caring for the land. Here in Colorado, we're having drought and beetle kill that is making forests impossible to even travel through. Refueling. There just aren't that many places in the world that you can find calm these days, and it's really important right now. This is a place where I find calmness, and also a place where I can be a painter where I'm painting on a big white landscape. Knowing the neighbors. Our neighbors couldn't figure out when we were having an RV skiing through the state why we would wake up at 3 a.m. in the morning to go ski, but nonetheless, they baked blueberry muffins for us on our travels. Becoming a naturalist, knowing the trees in your backyard, knowing the phases of the moon, meeting the locals, and making a deep connection with nature. I always think that people think the hardest part of climbing peaks is the climbing and the skiing and mountaineering, but really it's truly putting together a good team, like such is life, finding the right partners. Here, I think it's just the magic of the mountains. We can feel that we find ourselves by pushing away from the rest of the world, and discovering more inside. Here we have just nature making you feel small in the universe and making sure that you're humble, and that we're all connected in some way. Mountains are more than geological facts. They are more than something to climb up. They're something that's religious, divine, and they show us there is a possibility to go from earth to heaven. Thank you.
Wow, y'all, I'm honored to be in such great company. Beautiful work so far, and I can't wait to see the rest. Thanks to everyone at the ranch for having me. Sorry, I'm getting a feedback. Okay. So I got to know the ranch because I did a residency before the world fell apart there in February and March. And it was a wonderful experience. I'm an artist and I live in Miami, but I'm from Salt Lake City. So I kind of split my time between two completely opposite regions. And my work in general is kind of concerned with visualizing large systems changes and visualizing the Anthropocene and kind of trying to bring some formal objects into that difficult conversation. So this presentation is about a series called Carbon Paintings. And I did work on those at the ranch a little bit. So Leah, go ahead. So as most of you probably know and have witnessed in many cases, the wildfire season in the Western US and the world over is getting increasingly severe. And I started this series in 2018, and I was kind of grappling with how to turn them into objects. And, you know, I can't get into forest management over time and urban interface zones and us pushing out, but it can kind of safely be said that climate change and human habitation has a lot to do with the way wildfires are folding out. So as an artist and not an expert, I'm coming from this other lineage. So I think a lot about romantic depictions of landscape, especially in terms of painting and kind of how they functioned in our aesthetic sensibilities. And I was kind of pulling from that. So what I ended up doing was using burnt debris that I collected from wildfire burn scars to make large carbon paintings, which are kind of more like drawing, and presented them just as the end result of these fires, which is just pure carbon residue. And so I decided that it was important for me to go out and collect this material on my own whenever I could, to kind of bear witness to the site and understand the consequences and the conditions on the ground. So in 2018, I went to Malibu, California, Paradise, California, and the Oregon border. There were several fires up there. And since then, I've gone to some other sites. This is Malibu. You can see the sort of fence that melted. And this is I just take the debris itself and just rub it directly on there, trying to saturate the muslin as much as I can. This is an image from just outside of Paradise. I can't imagine what folks went through there. I mean, it was unbelievable what I saw. I can't imagine living it. And it just speaks a lot to our sort of inhabitation of the planet right now, not in a finger waggy way to the folks there at all, just as a collective. So this is the largest piece I created from that debris from Paradise. It's about 8 by 14 feet. The scale of those pieces is important. So when I was gonna come to Anderson Ranch earlier this year, I went back to the LA area and collected the 2019 fire season debris that I could get. I saw a lot of burnt infrastructure. That was kind of telling. This is another, you mentioned beetle kill. This is from a site in Utah that was a beetle kill that got struck by lightning that caused a giant fire, and then a mudslide came with an avalanche. So kind of this chain reaction of events that chronicle this change in the environment. So this is local. Many of you will recognize this. This is the Lake Christine burn scar just outside of Basalt. This is me walking up to collect debris, because when I arrived to Aspen, or to Snowmass, I had heard about this fire and wanted to respond directly. These are some quarantine quality photos. This was my process in the studio at the ranch, and I started to introduce text into these pieces as a way to kind of further give specificity, because it's important to the work. So I made a small collection of pieces for the open house, all relevant to the Lake Christine fire. That's the acreage, the amount of acreage burned there on the bottom. And that's kind of the direction that I'm going in, is bringing the text. And this one's large. This is about 7 by 11 feet or 8 by 11. And I'm kind of excited to continue working with the text in this way to give another entry point. That's it. Thank you.
Hey, Leah, can you guys see me?
We're ready when you are.
Oh, okay, cool. Sorry, I was waiting for myself to appear on the screen. Sorry about that. Hi, everyone. I just wanted to say thank you so much to the ranch. I'm really happy to be here tonight and very happy to be sharing space with the other presenters as well. This has been really fantastic. I'm a photographer. I work primarily with portraiture, and I look specifically at issues of identity, particularly gender and sexuality. I work in long-term projects, but when the ranch asked me to do this, I thought it would be more interesting to put together something that was responsive to this moment. And over the past few months in quarantine, I've been thinking a lot about the idea of physical touch and how that's something that so many of us are missing. And so I put together this edit around that idea. My relationship to the ranch is that I've been coming since 2014. I've been as a visiting artist, as a visiting critic, and also I've taught workshops there for several years. Okay, I think I'm ready, Leah. I've been thinking about relationships and how they help us understand and embody our own identities, particularly as queer people. This is an image of me and my partner, Vanessa, made early on in our relationship in 2013. Through my work, I try to speak not only to specific relationships, but to go even deeper to talk about the need we all have for intimate connection with others. My still life images, which often depict pairs of things, are one way I address this idea. Another theme in my work is family. I'm interested in the idea that we all come from a particular place and experience, but we ultimately choose our own paths. This is an image of me and my mom made at her home in Boston in 2012. I've always been interested in gesture and the way it speaks to intimacy. This is Erica and Krista. I love the gesture of their hands in the left panel. I was thinking about the idea of being in a relationship while also being an individual. This is another still life image called, imaginatively, pillows. In this image, I was thinking about the pillows as a stand-in for two people. This image is called Devotion. There are obvious connections to religious imagery and classical painting, but this particular moment is seen through a queer and intimate lens. A lot of my earlier work was made inside, but recently I've been photographing outdoors. This is a portrait of my friends Kelly and Jen, made at dusk in a park near my house, which has become an extension of my studio over the past few years. This is a portrait of my friends Jamie and Anne. Jamie in the front had recently had breast cancer and asked me to make portraits with her to document her changing body. Making this photo, I was thinking about Anne caring for her as this solid figure in the background. Sometimes the universe gifts you with people and moments. This is Zach and Oscar, photographed last summer. I had been photographing Oscar for a while individually, and one day he showed up to the shoot with Zach, who I was immediately taken with. This is another image of them from just a few weeks ago. What makes this photograph for me is the tenderness in Oscar's hand against Zach's arm. In all of my work, I pay careful attention to the gesture of the hands and the comfort level it implies. Most of the images I'm showing you here depict two people, but the majority of my work focuses on creating intimacy between myself and one other person. This is Colin, who I've been photographing for several years. This is an image of my mom and her partner, Chris, who are watching. It is part of my ongoing family work, but it also exemplifies something I often utilize in my pictures of couples, which is having one of the two people look directly at the camera. Over the past 8 years of our relationship, I've made a lot of pictures of Vanessa, but I included this one tonight, which is also an early one, because I love the gentle way her hand is resting on her chest. I've been making new self-portraits these past few months in quarantine, and this is one I made with Vanessa. I was thinking about the idea of care and how relationships shift from a new intensity to a deeper kind of knowing over time. I've also been photographing flowers, and I love this one in particular because of the way they appear to be people bending and embracing one another. Like my earlier still life images, these pictures also speak to desire and the need for connection with others. Thank you all very much.
Hello. Wow, that was really beautiful. Thank you, Jess. So my name is Yoonmi Nam, and I have been involved with Anderson Ranch. I have been instructor, and also I've also been student there, and I've also been a juror. So in many different ways. Today I'm going to talk about something that was kind of a side project and something that started more for fun with friends, and then it became something more for me. So yeah, so Leah, whenever you're ready. So in 2004, I went to an artist residency in rural Japan to learn Japanese water-based woodblock printing technique called mukuhanga. This is where I met artists Katie Baldwin and Mariko Jesse, who are now my collaborators. For 2 months, our hands were occupied with the process of learning something new, and our senses were immersed in this shared creative space. Our time in Japan was profound and inspiring. Since the residency, the three of us have kept in touch and formed a lasting connection that continued on after the residency. There was also a strong desire amongst us to somehow continue the creative dialogue that we shared during the residency period. Almost 10 years later, in 2015, in anticipation of the upcoming International Mukuhanga Conference that was held in Tokyo, we devised and began a collaborative project called wood+paper+box. With this project, we wanted to mark the 10-year anniversary of our friendship that began in Japan by reestablishing the creative discourse through making and exchanging mukuhanga prints. Because we all live far away from one another, we planned a way to work together long distance. For 1 year, we made mukuhanga prints individually and mailed them to one another. The exchange of prints that arrived in our mailboxes every couple of months became our nonverbal communication. In addition to the mailing of prints, we also set up mini residencies amongst ourselves, visiting one another's studios, sharing skills, and making things together. The result of this work is a collection of 18 mukuhanga prints exchanged throughout the year and housed in a clamshell box that we made together. After this initial project, we decided to continue the long-distance conversation and ultimately formed a collaborative of the same name, which is wood+paper+box. We set a schedule to complete a new box every 2 years, and currently we're working on our 4th box. Our second box is titled Alabama, California, Kansas. In this project, we explored the narratives, people, and landscapes of places that we now call home. The prints in this project were made using all different printmaking processes, including mukuhanga. For our third project titled Unfold, we thought about the structure, ideas, and acts of folding and unfolding. Through our experiments with paper and other foldable materials, we investigated the revealing and concealing of space, dimensionality, time, and narrative. We've just begun our 4th project called Mise en scène. For this, we're exploring the ideas of the arrangement of scenery and stage properties using prints and multiples that we make and add to the box. We have made 1 exchange so far, and we each started documenting various arrangements using the items that we got in the mail. Each time we make an exchange, more items will be added to the collection and different arrangements will be made. Our ongoing and evolving arrangements will be documented on our Instagram at wood+paper+box throughout this year. Photos of selected arrangements will also be made into a small zine that will be added to the completed box. At the end, it will contain a total of 9 prints, 1 collaboratively made Japanese folding screen, and 1 zine. With this current project, our aim is to encourage more interactivity from the viewer as they pull out items from the box and arrange and rearrange them in their own way. Thank you.
Can everybody see me? Can you hear me? Okay, great. All right. Hello, everyone. My name is DeAndrea. I am 18 years old. I'm from Chicago. I recently graduated from the Chicago High School for the Arts, and I will attend Clark Atlanta University in the fall. I also consider myself an artivist, and growing up, I grew tired of only being taught about Black history once a month. So I began utilizing my artistry in hopes of creating conversations amongst my audience on topics that were often swept under the rug. And we can just get right into the presentation now. Okay, this piece right here was actually a self-portrait. At 15, I became more aware of lynching and Emmett Till's story. I couldn't believe that lynching was legal at one point in time, and of course I was angry. So I turned my anger into art and put myself in the place of my ancestors who were lynched. And this piece was actually made at Anderson Ranch on a full ride scholarship. And I use many images that are related to my ancestral background in slavery. And it was like, at the time, I didn't really understand my background or where I came from, because my ancestors were, I'm having like a messing up. Okay, I was frustrated because I had no knowledge of what part in Africa my ancestors came from before they were enslaved, and trying to figure out my roots was equivalent to putting together a giant puzzle with essential pieces missing. And as for the first series, okay, so that series, myself as abolitionist series, I believe that abolitionists deserve more recognition than an oblique history lesson every February, so I took it upon myself and posed as Sojourner Truth, Harriet Tubman, and William Steele. They played a major role in abolishing slavery, and I wanted my viewers to know that there were more African American role models besides Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. As for this series, it's from my About Place series. At the time, my parents officially separated my sophomore year in high school, and I had a really tough time trying to adjust to my father's permanent absence in my home. The next cluster of images are from my Riveting Revival series, and because I have a little time left, I'm just gonna read an excerpt from my artist statement. My work makes a statement that my God is a real powerful being and not a fictitious character. In addition, my work captures the worship experience as a serious and life-changing interaction with God, not to be made a mockery of at all. My work reflects the true worship experience of a community of believers. And yeah, that's it.
DeAndrea, that was really beautiful. Thank you. All the panelists, I'm really excited to have heard those. Was a really just a great mix of really powerful messaging, and I'm so excited about it. I'll remind all the participants, if you hover over the bottom of your Zoom screen, on the far left, you'll see a little option for Q&A. Please type your Q&A questions into this screen, and I will pose them to the panelists. If I could start by saying there's so many great places to connect between different speeches that I'd really love to maybe start being out here and thinking about nature. There was some great crosses between Cara's work and her explanation of the interaction and how people have impacted the world and taking that experience back to the studio. and Christy's taking herself out into that experience in nature. And Christy, I wondered if I could ask you maybe first to reflect a little bit on what you saw when you were observing Cara's work. And then Cara, I'm gonna ask you a little bit what your response was when you got to watch Christy's. So Christy, I'll let you go first. Great to see you.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I thought is that we're gonna have to actually do something together out here. Which we may have to get her a ski set up and she could come out. But, you know, I think through skiing, you know, I had a project where we've skied the 100 highest peaks in Colorado, and it's brought us to just about every single forest, national forest in the state, and to see the devastations that are happening firsthand from climate change has been one of the most educational things I've seen. And it's to be able to make work out of that is so impressive, Cara, that I mean, I could tell you a lot of other places we could go. And even thinking about, you know, the avalanche cycle that we had last year and the devastation, you know, the power of nature that we've seen. And I wish we could show some images of that, but it's been absolutely incredible. I mean, it was a 300-year cycle for those of you who weren't here. And the projects are endless as far as making statements on the climate change. I thought it was really beautiful, the way that you were able to interpret it and turn it into something visual. Yeah.
Thank you, Christy. Cara, obviously a very different experience with nature to see Christy's images and her experiences out there. I'd love to hear your thoughts on how thinking from the perspective of your work, you thought about seeing that experience and hearing about Christy's focus on resilience in the natural world.
Sure, and it's Cara.
Cara, sorry.
No worries. It's spelled freaky. So, you know, I thank you so much, Christy. I mean, of course, you're experiencing those sites in such a different way. You have to go like deep into the backcountry and do like scary skiing, which has always been like a weak point of mine. I'm like a hiker. I'm like a solid hiker where there's very little room for error. That's like my comfort zone. That said, I would love to like accompany you anywhere I'm invited. But you know, it's like growing up out here, I've been kind of like exposed to and have had to contend with like beautiful images of the West ad nauseum, both through paintings and photography. And I'm not trying to hate on that stuff. I think it's important and I kind of have a love for it, but I also think it blinds people to very real issues that exist. And that includes climate change stuff, but it also includes very deep social injustice and settlement issues. So always in my work, I'm trying to kind of undermine those pretty images. And at the risk of being like dark and doomy and gloomy, I do want to show the underbelly there. And so with the fire stuff, you know, even I'm in central Utah right now at a different ranch that I also love very much. And we were at about 10,500 feet yesterday looking around. And I mean, the beetle kill, even in my lifetime, I can see such a stark change with that. And the fire, you know, I'm seeing more and more burn scars. I'm seeing more and more cattle that are impacting, you know, sagebrush and sage grouse and all of that stuff. And it's very markable and it's very visible, but it manages to be invisible because we're flooded with beautiful images on Instagram and on postcards and in calendars. So I don't know where I was going with that, but it was awesome to see your work.
Perfect.
Yeah, a nice ping pong.
And so many connections between different pieces. I'm just going to toss out one or two, and then I'm going to go to some of the questions that have been posted online. Jess, I was really taken by just the personal intimacy and closeness of figures and relationships in your work, which is just such a powerful visual. And at the same time, thinking of Yoonmi and this idea of relationships that are so distant and by construction are distant. And if I could ask you, each of you maybe to reflect a little bit on the difference in your experiences within those art forms, both that sort of very direct personal intimacy, and then the obviously the experience of that very geographic distance. And I guess what I find quite fascinating is the experience we've all had over this sense of isolation and being separate and wanting to build connection And of course, as Jess pointed out, or not been Jess, someone pointed out, we're also very intense in the intimacy we have in the people that are in our house and that are within our bubble. So if either of you were willing to share some thoughts, I'd really love to hear it.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I noticed that comment. I think, Whitney, you said that about your some of your photographers, and I laughed because I'm in a house with my partner and our 2-year-old, and so it is a lot of like intensity. And then I miss other people like that I really would love to see. But going back to your question, you know, I think for me, my work is so centered around relationships with other people. And I haven't been able to work in the way that I usually work, which is being in physical space with someone and creating this very quiet, intimate moment together. And so that has been a big shift for me recently, which is part of why I shared the images that I shared. But then I also have worked focusing on really long-term relationships. So this has allowed me to revisit that too. So yeah, I would say it's the act of being in physical space with someone else is incredibly important to what I do. And it's really been a significant loss to not be able to do that recently.
So it's kind of been interesting for me. This is kind of the side thing that I do kind of in parallel with this other body of work that I do in my own personal work. And the thing that is for me personally, this process of working with my collaborators, and one of them actually lives in Japan right now. So there's this huge distance between all of us. But not much has changed because in some ways it's almost as if we anticipated this thing, and it's just been working the way that, you know, we have started to work with this long distance relationship we've always had to do these, before Zoom was a thing, we had to do these group chats and mailing things to each other and trying to kind of work together collaboratively. And there's this kind of sense of delayed time because we had to wait for the mail to arrive. And then also, in contrast to that, we have this technology that we use, which now everybody uses now to communicate. So it's kind of been interesting just to kind of see how this work that I'm doing with the collaborators have not changed much in the way that we actually work. I would say the only thing that changed is that my one collaborator who lives in Japan, Japan Post has stopped mailing things to US. I think it had something to do with flight availability or something. So the project had been affected, I guess, a little bit due to the mailing system. But other than that, it's kind of been actually very productive.
Fantastic. I really appreciate it. We've had a flood of questions come in. So while I didn't necessarily call out a few of the people on the panel, I think they will come up in our Q&A on the screen that I'm seeing here. So the first one I'll pose says, for Whitney, as an editor, did you find yourself making different choices for photographers to show these different perspectives regarding the COVID, as opposed to showing the frontline kind of images?
We have a lot of frontline. We've sent out tens of photographers out in the world, really working regionally. And I think that's something that's been interesting about the past few months is I think over the last number of years as editors at National Geographic, we've been really looking to hire photographers much more regionally. And this last few months have obviously accelerated that as people can't travel. So we have a lot of that material. I think for today, I just chose something that was a little more intimate. And I think that one thing we did here as we assigned photographers over the last number of months is that, they really liked sort of the opportunity. Well, I think they were grateful for the opportunity to have an assignment, but also to really be asked to look differently at the world that was right around them too. And I actually it inspired me. What I guess I didn't mention at the beginning of the talk was that it actually inspired me to take a class at Anderson Ranch this summer with Andrea, focused on home. So I'm not a photographer myself, but I think actually being in isolation and quarantine inspired me to get creative too. So.
Awesome. DeAndrea, the few questions have come in for you, so I may try to combine them a little bit, but if I could start with, the question was, your photos show deep feeling and history of your family. Thank you for sharing and bringing light some of those worlds that we should all know more about. How do you see your photography growing and moving forward with these projects? Do you see ideally the use of your photography on different subjects?
Well, for now, because I just kind of go based off of what I'm going through or what bothers me in general. So even though like my freshman year, I was focused on, you know, the past, on slavery and finding out all the horrific situations or things that happened to Black people. And I used my anger towards the act of slavery, and I used that to create my artwork. And then going into the self as abolitionist, at the time I was angry because every February for Black History Month, we learn about the same Black figures, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Rosa Parks. And going into my junior year and sophomore year, it was kind of both, I created artwork about my family separation. And as of right now, I am still focusing on my religion because recently my faith was tested and I grew distant from the church community. And I also got back together, you know, back on track spiritually. And I was more inspired with my religion and the community around it. So it kind of grows as my inspiration changes as I grow. So I honestly don't really know where it will go, but I know I will never stop making art.
Accra, I'm gonna pass to you quickly. One, while listening to DeAndrea talk, I was thinking, I wonder what Accra would ask her. So I might start with posing that question. You've seen all the panelists come across here. You've been a teacher and seen this work. A few people, I've got more questions here for DeAndrea than anyone else about just amazingly powerful her work is. So I'd love to hear your thoughts as a teacher. You're looking at a young artist, even I think not 19, right? Is that the right age?
18, she said.
18.
Yeah, wow, congratulations.
Thank you.
Also, you know, thinking for you particularly, if you could follow really about how you look at your choice of film versus digital in some of the project that you presented today. And to me, those two subjects overlap. So I'll kind of pass to you and let you go.
Okay, well, the first thing that came to mind wasn't really a question for DeAndrea, but I was just marveling that everyone must learn about the world in a particular order at a particular time. So she came to Emmett Till at the age of 15, which was a lot earlier than I got to Emmett Till. And it's fascinating because in that moment, it's so overwhelming, that image, and to see how she interpreted it. I really look forward to seeing how her understanding grows, changes, deepens. I mean, right now I find it fascinating, your relationship with the church, something which is incredibly powerful and deeply problematic at the same time. You know, I'm thinking of the work that Jess is doing, and I know the Black church has struggled with queer people and people who are gender non-conforming, but that doesn't mean they've been rejected, but it's a complicated space. But yet, at the same time, it's an institution which has helped bring African Americans literally out of slavery. So it's just this really, it's an area rich to look at. And so I'm really excited about what you might do there.
So Accra, we've only got a few minutes left, so I'm going to ask you to talk a little bit about some of your choice of imagery versus
Oh, right. Yeah. Oh, I forgot. Yeah, digital. So I like looked in my studio when I started this COVID journal, and I was like, I got film, I got paper, I've got like the traditional setup. So I'm going to go with that because I didn't know what the future was going to bring. I mean, we still don't know what the future is going to bring. There's this whole second wave thing in the fall they keep talking about, and I don't know what I'm going to have access to. I can actually make developer from scratch in my studio. I have all the chemicals. I'm good to go. I guess I'm a survivalist artist. Every project demands a unique approach. I wanted this to be medium format. I wanted it to be a square. I needed that portability, but also the clarity of that format, something that I couldn't get with digital actually. So there was that aspect as well.
I'm really thrilled to have everyone together. The intimacy of first these Thinker Thursdays on campus here, and the wonderful community that Andrea and Leah and Esther brought together in person seems to have really worked in bringing us together during this difficult time. And really, this felt like such a treat and a break. And some of the people posting comments made the same mention. At the same time, we're all trying to find our way to continue our passions, to stay creative, and really to figure out how to react from these positions of isolation, these worries about health, the economic uncertainty that caused, and of course, then the explosion, yet again, of racial injustice really grabbing our attention and galvanizing people's emotions and commitment, and the real deep challenges that has created for us all through this time. If I could ask maybe just in a real rapid fire, a sentence or two to walk through the panelists to share, what has kept you going and focused on your passions, and what has really, or maybe what has really been something that has shaken and challenged you over these past few months in this variety of really difficult emotional, social, intellectual experiences. So if we could maybe, I'll ask that we run through the same order that we spoke in. So Accra, I'll start with you, but we really have about a half a minute each. So we're gonna go real quick and share our thoughts. So everybody else gets a little prep time. You're on.
So what keeps me going is this idea of the responsibility that artists have. Artists look and see professionally. We make images that reflect back the world that we see professionally. And so we have a responsibility in these moments of great social change to bear witness, to make things visible, to make sure that people see. Sometimes that vision is delayed. There was a very brave man in China during the Cultural Revolution. He exposed hundreds of rolls of film and buried them all because it was too dangerous for him to process them. Decades later, they were recovered, and we now have an image of something that might have been lost.
Whitney, do you have a thought to share?
Yeah, Accra, it's interesting. Responsibility is also the word that I've been thinking about a lot. As a journalist, I think that, 3 months ago, we all sort of woke up and really recognized that COVID was a story that only comes along as a journalist, sort of once, let's hope in a lifetime. We feel a great responsibility to cover that story, both personally as a journalist and also as a journalist at National Geographic. And then the last month, has erupted as well. And I think we've been thinking a lot about, responsibility as to tell these stories, and also the responsibility in terms of the stories we tell and who tells those stories. So that's certainly been top of mind for me and my colleagues at Nat Geo.
Christy.
Yeah, I think for me, I have been appreciating having the ability to go into nature and spend the time there, but it's not lost on me that this is a privilege that I have that many don't. And that's been difficult to kind of reckon with. I think that it's awesome to see that there's this intersection between social justice and the environment coming up, and that people are finding nature actually out their window. The amount of birders that are starting to pop up, and people finding that you don't actually need big swaths of wilderness. So.
Oh. Cara.
You know, honestly, it's been a little bit of a strange time. I think that there's a time to make stuff, and there's also a time to internalize and learn. And I've mostly been in that phase. And I think, you know, there's a lot of back end work that needs to be done, like reining stuff in, checking on each other, making sure our immediate needs are met. I think that's kind of like taken the fore for me, and what I want for my community too.
Jess?
Yeah, I think for me, making work is the thing that keeps me grounded, and I have to keep doing it to kind of keep a sense of sanity and normalcy. My work swings between a more outward-looking documentary political work and a very personal interior look at my own life. And I think I've had to come to terms with the fact that I'm making work in the personal realm, and I'm putting my kind of activist and social justice energy out in the world in different ways. And that response has been really healing for me, and that's kind of how I'm going forward.
Thank you. Yoonmi?
For me, I think particularly as a printmaker, I'm so used to it and inspired by sharing studio space with other artists. And that's one of the things that I've been really missing. And just having this kind of, sort of like what I was talking about with my collaborative work. It's not necessarily working on same thing together, but working side by side and just kind of feeding off of the energy of other people. And that's what's been a little bit difficult, just being alone in my own house working. But even though, you know, sometimes I do get tired of doing Zooms every day, this has been something that's been really great, to at least be able to connect with my friends and other artists and my community in general. And so that's what I think is allowing me to keep going. Different ways of connecting with my community.
DeAndrea?
Something that's been challenging was actually not going to church because everything shut down due to coronavirus. But something that's also kept me sane was continuously making art at home, because normally because I majored in photography at Shy Arts, all I was doing was taking pictures. Like, I never had time to do other forms of media of art making. And I really love to paint. So now that I'm finally done with school, I've been painting more and painting on like different purses and shoes and everything else I could think of, to try to like break the norm of just always painting on a canvas. So I've just been creating a lot of artwork and spending time with family.
Really fantastic panelists. I thank all of you so much. I'm going to steal a quick quote, if I can, from Whitney's talk that I jotted down while she was talking. We're all in this challenging time. We have personal challenges, we have community challenges, but she used the quote, or to quote her, she used the line, "the incredible here and nowness of what we're experiencing right now." And this program and the ability to hear and see all of you now has been a really powerful thing for me. So Whitney, I hope I didn't misuse your statement, but it was such a beautiful line. Thank all of you online for being a part of the Anderson Ranch community. And I wish you all a great night. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. See you. Bye, Peter. Bye, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.